So in the last video, we talked about how ecologists determine the number of organisms that live in a certain population. But populations are very tricky sometimes because it all depends on how they are actually dispersed. For example, there are three main kinds of dispersion patterns. Sometimes populations tend to clump all in the same place. You see that in things like herd behavior, and you can see that in schools of fish, and you also see that in sometimes flowers in the field all kind of gather in the same spot. Or in the intertidal zone, where there's an area that has a lot of nutrients, and then the organisms will kind of clump all together. Now, clumping will happen for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's because all the nutrients are in one place, so the animals have to clump there in order to eat them. Or sometimes they do that for protection, because the large numbers or the concentrated numbers actually adds protection to them, both in terms of strength and in terms of likelihood of being eaten. Because if you're in a large herd of animals, what are the chances that you're going to be the one that's actually going to be eaten? You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to beat the predator. You just have to beat the other people from your herd. So that actually increases your chances of survival. Not to mention that a large number of animals can also be daunting for some other organisms to actually hunt you, because you have strength in numbers. And it could also be, like I said, because of the concentration of nutrients. But remember, this also leads to increased competition between the organisms. So there's got to be a balance there. The benefits of being clumped have to outweigh the problems that you have by competition. You're just going to increase disease because everybody's in the same spot, so it's going to be easy for diseases to travel. Toxins are going to gather more quickly in that area because everybody's living in the same place. Just think of a city, for example. All the problems that cities have to deal with because a lot of people are living in the same place, from crime to food to disease and to pollution. All of these things are because cities represent what we call clumped organization dispersions of a population. But sometimes you also see what is called a uniform distribution, and that is when animals live kind of together, but they spread out as much as they can within the habitat. Like you see in the penguins doing it, and predators will do that in the wild too. They will have their territory, and they will actually spread as much as they can away from each other. Or nesting birds will also do this very often. Why do they do this? Because of territoriality, because of competition between them, because they are trying to avoid each other as much as possible. Now, you will see that within herds sometimes, even though it seems clumped, they're actually spreading out as much as they possibly can. But it's more common in larger ecosystems to see that the organisms will actually spread in a way that it will completely try to avoid each other. And the consequence of this is that if you avoid each other, you're going to be less competition for resources, less competition for area. And so whenever competition is higher, or the benefits of clumping are smaller than the benefits of avoiding each other, you're going to see a more uniform distribution. Now, when there isn't any interaction between the organisms and dispersal seems to be chaotic and it doesn't really have a pattern to it, because perhaps the organisms are not really competing with each other, or either necessarily concentrated where there's a lot of resources, you see what is called a random distribution. And this is very common in trees in the field, for example, because the seeds get spread by the wind, and so you don't necessarily have a uniform distribution pattern, and you will see more of a random distribution pattern. So remember, clumped will occur when there's a great benefit to grouping, or when there's a benefit of lots of nutrients in one place. But it does lead to some problems for the animals, so the benefits have to outweigh the costs. On the uniform is because the cost of being together is too high, and because there's a lot of territoriality, so they tend to spread out as much as possible in the ecosystem. And on the random is because there typically is no interaction between the organisms, and it's just dispersal at random, like it happens in seeds in the wind, for example. So I hope this makes sense. On the next video, we're going to talk about population growth and decline. I'll see you guys then.